Rain poured softly over the city of Charleston as mourners gathered inside St. Mary's Chapel. The scent of roses and lilies mixed with the heavy silence, broken only by the quiet sobs of those who came to say goodbye to James Carlyle, a respected businessman, philanthropist, husband, and father. Olivia sat in the front pew, dressed in black, her hands trembling as she held their son Eli's tiny fingers. The 6-year-old boy didn't fully grasp what was happening, but he clung to his mother, sensing the weight of her grief. James had died unexpectedly, a heart attack while on a business trip in Miami. Olivia's world had collapsed overnight. They'd had their struggles, but she'd never imagined burying him so young, so suddenly. The past few days had been a blur, arrangements, condolences, and legal matters she didn't want to think about. She had no idea that today would be far worse than anything she'd faced yet. Just as the priest began his sermon, a sharp voice cut through the chapel. "He never loved her!" Heads turned. A blonde woman in a red dress, wildly inappropriate for a funeral, stood at the back of the room. She stepped forward confidently, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "I'm Savannah Blake," she announced, her voice echoing off the stained glass windows. "And James was mine. He told me everything. That he was trapped in a loveless marriage. That he only stayed because of their kid. He wanted to leave her. For me." Gasps rippled through the chapel. Murmurs rose. Some guests turned toward Olivia with pity in their eyes, others in disbelief. Eli looked up at her, confused. Olivia remained still, her expression unreadable. She didn't cry. Didn't move. She had long suspected that James had secrets. Late nights, whispered calls, strange business trips, all the signs had been there. But now, facing the humiliation of betrayal in front of her family, friends, and even her son, she stayed silent. Composed. Then, as if on cue, a tall man in a gray suit stood from the back row and made his way down the aisle. It was Arthur Grant, James's longtime attorney. He carried a polished wooden box. He approached Savannah and held it out to her. "This," he said formally, "was left specifically for you. James wanted you to have it." Savannah smirked and reached for the box, clearly expecting jewelry or perhaps a private letter filled with love. She opened it confidently, and instantly froze. Her eyes widened. Her mouth twisted. A scream tore from her throat, high and shrill, making even the priest flinch. The box slipped from her hands and crashed to the floor. A small USB drive skidded across the aisle. "What the hell is this?" she shrieked. "No! No! He wouldn't! He loved me!" Arthur calmly picked up the USB. "I suggest you watch the contents privately," he said with a steely look. Olivia stood slowly, gathering her son in her arms. She looked at Savannah, not with anger, but with quiet strength. The room was silent again, all eyes now on the widow. Without saying a word, Olivia walked out of the chapel, her son clinging to her shoulder, leaving behind whispers, stares, and a mistress unraveling in the ruins of her own lies. The whispers followed Savannah out of the chapel like a swarm of bees. Her high heels clattered unevenly on the sidewalk as she stumbled to her car, hands shaking, lips trembling. That box. That damn box. Whatever was on that USB drive, it had to be a misunderstanding. A joke. James loved her. He said it. Over and over again. Back in her apartment, a sleek high-rise overlooking Charleston Harbor, she poured herself a glass of wine with trembling hands and inserted the USB into her laptop. She hesitated for a moment before clicking the only file it contained. It was labeled simply, "If you're watching this, I'm gone." The screen went black for a few seconds, then James's face appeared. He was seated in his office, the one she knew so well, the walnut desk, the navy curtains. But his expression wasn't the one she remembered. There was no charm in his smile, no warmth in his eyes. "Savannah," he said, his voice cold. "If you're watching this, I'm dead. And you've done exactly what I knew you would, tried to turn my funeral into a spectacle." She blinked. Her wine glass stopped midair. "I'm not surprised," James continued. You were always about the spotlight, the drama, the power play. And I let it happen. Because I was weak. Because I made a mistake. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk. You were never the love of my life. That title belongs to Olivia. She's the strongest, kindest, most patient woman I've ever known. And I betrayed her. Over and over. You were an escape, Savannah. A dangerous distraction. You fed my ego, but you never touched my soul. Savannah's mouth fell open. You wanted money. You wanted status. And you got some of it. But you pushed too far. You threatened to go public, remember? You said you'd ruin me if I didn't leave Olivia. You played a dangerous game. James paused, then glanced off camera. When he looked back, his face had hardened. I chose my family. Not because you forced my hand, but because I realized what I stood to lose. I updated my will. You get nothing. Not a cent. Not even the apartment I paid for. That goes back to the estate. The USB you're watching? Consider it closure. The screen went black. Savannah sat frozen. Her breath quickened. She didn't cry. She didn't scream again. This time she simply stared, stunned, hollow, and defeated. Across town, Olivia sat on the edge of Eli's bed, running her fingers through his hair as he drifted off to sleep. His small hand held tightly to the stuffed bear James had bought him on his 5th birthday. Downstairs, Arthur waited in the kitchen, sipping tea politely. She opened the box? Olivia asked when she came down. She did, Arthur replied. I'd say it had the intended effect. Olivia gave a slow nod. There was no triumph in her eyes, no smug satisfaction. Just exhaustion, and a hint of release. Did he really mean everything he said in that video? Arthur looked at her gently. He recorded it 2 weeks before his trip to Miami. He asked me to hold on to it. Said he owed you the truth, one way or another. Olivia closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she breathed deeply. Not all wounds heal with time. But sometimes, truth stops the bleeding. A week after the funeral, the heavy air around the Carlisle estate began to lift, but the questions remained. Olivia hadn't opened the safe in James's office since his death. She hadn't been ready. But now, with Eli at school and the house finally quiet, she stood before it, key in hand, heart pounding. Arthur Grant had asked her to meet him that morning for the official reading of the will. But before that, he urged her to open the safe. There's something in there James left just for you, he'd said. The key turned with a soft click. The door swung open slowly, revealing a neat stack of documents, a leather-bound journal, and a sealed envelope with her name written in James's handwriting, bold and unmistakable. Olivia took a shaky breath and opened the letter. Liv, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. For everything. For lying. For cheating. For the late nights and fake meetings and for making you feel second in your own marriage. You deserve better. You still do. I know what I did can't be undone. But I want to make something right. I updated my will. Everything I have, the house, the business shares, the Charleston property, it's all yours. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness, but because it's always been yours. You built this life with me. And for Eli, there's a trust fund. Enough to cover college, dreams, mistakes, and maybe a few wild adventures. Tell him I loved him. Tell him I wasn't perfect, but I tried, at least in the end, to be a man he could be proud of. I never told you this, but I watched you every morning with him, the way you packed his lunch, the way you bent down to tie his shoes even when your back hurt. That's real love. The kind I was too blind to value when it mattered most. Live freely now, Liv. Without me holding you back. I'll carry my regrets. You carry your strength. Always. James. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks as she folded the letter. Her hands shook not from grief, but from the deep, aching blend of anger, sorrow, and something like release. 2 hours later, Olivia sat in Arthur's office, the mahogany walls lined with law books and James's old photos. Arthur cleared his throat and began reading the will aloud, his tone formal but gentle. As expected, Olivia was named the sole executor and primary beneficiary of the Carlyle estate. But then came the surprise. James also left a secondary clause. Arthur said. A donation, $1 million, to a women's support organization in Charleston. It's anonymous, but he stated it should be made in honor of you. Olivia's eyes widened. I didn't know. He instructed that it be used for women recovering from betrayal, abuse, or loss, for women like Liv, he wrote. For a moment, Olivia didn't know what to say. This was the James she remembered from their early years, the dreamer, the builder, the man who once said he wanted to make a difference. Somewhere along the way, that man had gotten lost. But maybe, just maybe, he'd found his way back before the end. That evening, she told Eli about the trust fund. Daddy left me a gift? He asked, wide-eyed. Olivia nodded, kneeling to meet his gaze. Yes, baby. So you can do anything you want when you grow up. Eli grinned. Can I be an astronaut? She laughed through her tears. Absolutely. Whatever your heart wants. And just like that, a new chapter quietly began, not one written by James, but by Olivia. One built on truth, resilience, and the legacy of a woman who survived heartbreak and turned it into something stronger than love, freedom. 2 months had passed since James Carlyle's funeral, but the shockwaves of that day still rippled through Charleston's social circles. Whispers about the mistress, the box, and the video swirled at country clubs and charity luncheons. But Olivia had stepped away from all of it, not to hide, but to heal. She'd sold the beach house in Hilton Head, cut ties with the board of James's company, and converted the guest house on their property into a small office. There, she began planning something new, something hers. The fund James left for the women's organization had sparked something in her. For years, Olivia had lived in the shadows of her husband's image, carefully curating their life to appear perfect. Now, she no longer had to pretend. With the help of local advocates and attorneys, she launched the Live Project, a non-profit dedicated to supporting women who had survived betrayal, abuse, or abandonment. Not just with therapy or shelter, but with legal help, job placement, and financial literacy. Real tools for real independence. And she told her story. At the organization's launch event, she stood before a crowd of nearly 200 community leaders, donors, survivors, and held the microphone with steady hands. My name is Olivia Carlyle, she began. I was married to a man who cheated on me, lied to me, and left me with more questions than answers. But I am not here to shame him. I'm here because I survived him. And because I know I'm not alone. The room was silent, but electric. I stayed for years, convincing myself it was for our son, for our image, for our life. I gave up parts of myself one piece at a time, until one day, there was almost nothing left. She paused, locking eyes with a woman in the third row who was silently crying. But when I saw the truth, not just about him, but about me, I realized I had the power to rebuild. And not in the shadow of a man, but in the light of truth. Applause broke out. Olivia smiled, not for show, but from a place deeper than she'd known was still alive. Meanwhile, Savannah Blake had disappeared from the spotlight. Word spread that she'd left Charleston, her reputation in tatters. Some said she'd moved to Atlanta, others swore they saw her working at a boutique in Miami. Olivia didn't care. For the first time in years, what Savannah did, or said, had no power over her. One afternoon, as Olivia and Eli walked home from school, he looked up at her with a thoughtful expression. Mom? He asked. Do you think Dad can still see us? She smiled softly, brushing his curls out of his eyes. Maybe, she said. And if he can, I hope he's proud of you. Of me? Why not you? I think he already was. But he just didn't know how to show it. They paused at the front steps, and Eli looked up at their house. It feels different now. It is, Olivia said. It's ours. That night, after putting Eli to bed, Olivia stood by the window, watching the wind bend the trees. In the reflection of the glass, she didn't see a widow or a victim. She saw a woman standing tall, still healing, but no longer haunted. Freedom didn't come in a courtroom or a will. It came through facing the truth, owning it, and choosing to build something better with it. James Carlyle's story ended the day his heart stopped. Olivia's was just beginning.